There's been a big conversation over the past couple of weeks as far as what's considered an oldie. There was a TikToker that went viral because they said that a track on Nirvana's 1991 album Nevermind was considered an oldie. There's also a lot of videos on, on Facebook Reels and TikTok that are kind of going through different challenges, seeing different music genres. So I wanted to bring in media personality, radio host out from V103, and of course, one of my favorite people on the entire planet, Jeanne Sparrow. To chat all about this. Thank you so much.
It's so good to see you, friend. I
is.
love it. I thank you for asking me to be with you. I did my homework. I'm all ready.
So let's first go talk a little bit about your show on V103. What are some of the songs that you play, the ones that get the most requested, and kind of the feeling that you get from playing these hits for people?
Okay, so the show I do is called the Saturday Morning Wake Up Club, and it's if for anybody in Chicago who knows about like old school DJs and stuff, I basically took over the spot that Herb Kent used to do, and he's the guy who named the word Dusties for Chicago oldies. And so I play a lot. Our station overall is formatted for R&B and throwbacks. So today's hits and throwbacks to the 2000s, 90s, and further back. My show goes a little bit further because the audience is pretty wide for the show, and it has traditionally on Saturday mornings been about music from mainly the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and a little bit of 60s for my senior listeners. Then you've got the Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, and into the 80s, and the Prince and things like that. It's because it's R&B, people are really super attached to certain artists. Luther Vandross, you can never go wrong with him. Anita Baker. And when you talk about, some of the big groups like Earth, Wind and Fire, a lot of times it's about, let me hear this artist that reminds me of this time, less so than the music, because people, I think, have this music already and they can listen to it when they want to. So they want to hear how the progression of the music happens during the 4 hours that I do it.
That you do it. Let's go ahead and talk about present day. So obviously, oldies, let's just take a 22-year-old person. Let's make the math easy. You're born in the year, 2000, you're 22 right now. 2005 is kindergarten. 2016, you're getting your driver's license. 2017 is prom. These are those specific moments of those specific songs. And unless your parents taught you about music before your time, or unless you lived in a household where you learned about these songs, it's going to seem new to you because you weren't raised in that generation. So let's talk a little bit about, kind of that.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing I think that happens with our Gen Zers, because that's that generation, is that a lot of their parents are my age and a little bit older. And if they listen to their parents' music, because that's the other thing I find happening, and it even happens with me when I'm listening to music, is I go, oh, my parents used to love that, like Gladys Knight, Al Green, stuff like that, because we attach our childhood memories to the music our parents listened to. So you might not have been listening to much more than Blues Clues or whatever it was when you were 5 years old. Your parents' music is what you hear, and it brings back a memory. I think that what happens with Gen Z, and this is the thing I find really interesting, because we have pretty strong numbers in that younger 1834 group that these young people fall into. And I think it's because of sampling and the idea that all of the new music, not all of it, but a lot of new music has its basis in older music. And then if you are at all curious about where it came from and you see what it was sampled, then you go, oh my goodness. Same thing, like we're kind of the first generation of sampling. So there are songs that we completely identify as that person's songs, like Mary J. Blige's Be Happy. I just played the originating song, which is Curtis Mayfield's Someone to Love Me, I think is the name of it. I can't remember that, but it's a Curtis Mayfield song. And it is exactly a lift of that song. I only learned that when I started hosting this show a few years ago.
You take songs that like growing up, Ice Ice Baby, Under Pressure from Queen, and obviously a big hit for Vanilla Ice, and P. Diddy or Puff Daddy or whatever you'd like to call him in the 90s did that for a lot of people learning songs from the 70s and early 80s.
DeBarge, he lifted so many hooks from DeBarge. He picked up songs that were album cuts that DJs would know about, like party DJs would know about, and turned them into hooks because they were solid hits. And so I think that there's this continuity, like what hip hop artists did in the late 70s, early 80s by sampling and rapping over the instrumental tracks. Like it was a necessity because they just wanted to rap. It was about the words. So the beat had to be good, but it was stripped down. It often got lifted from someplace else. And that has started, I think, this really interesting continuity, especially in R&B music, but rock is included in that as well, where you go, where did that come from? And then you get an attachment to the original because it reminds you of the new thing.
Because there's a new Lotto song called Big Energy, which she raps a little bit, and then the remix has Mariah Carey's Fantasy over it. So like, I know a little bit of the rap lyrics, but I'm like, I'm just waiting for the Mariah part so I can start singing along in the car, you know?
Right. And that's how we connect. That's how you connect different generations that might not have been into your music or even aware of it.
But also too, there's a group of people, and I'm sure generations that only know Mariah from her holiday music and didn't really maybe necessarily know that she had a whole career outside of that. So this might be the first time that, you know, teenagers and, you know, younger kids get to hear her and like, oh, this is a great song. Let me go ahead and rediscover it from the mid 90s.
And I think I think that's the reason why current generations, like especially younger millennials and Gen Zers, are way more open to music than we may have been when we were younger with our parents' music, because there's continuity in it, but it's hard to hear it. You know, like my parents couldn't stand hip hop when they first heard it. Right? They were like, what is that? Why? My mom thought the record was skipping because all she could hear was the same. She was like, you are going to ruin that record player I bought you. And I was like, no, mama, that's the song. And she was like, it was all this jibber jabber and whatever. And my mother was a musician. But it's about seeing the through line, which is so much more obvious now. And it's a good way to cross generations. Like there's a lot of hip hop I love now that my friends get in my car and they're like, what the hell are you listening to? And I was like, it's the booty music because it sounds like this and they sampled that. And that's what I liked, and now I like the booty music. What's wrong with that?
Well, exactly. There's nothing wrong with that. Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody song came out in 1987, but it had been played in various movies, various TV shows. It's played at probably almost every wedding. So there's not a time period that is like associated with that song because it brings back a feeling of like, I remember this song from a wedding. I remember this song from driving around when I was in high school. I remember this song from being with my friends. I remember dancing to this at a club. You know, there's so many ways that people kind of celebrate that song. So there's certain genres or certain songs that kind of don't get that oldies label that just kind of just become classic.
Yes. And I think because here's the thing, the nomenclature that we use around music is very culture specific and format specific, because there once was a time where there was an oldies format where they were playing like doo-wop and things like that and what have you. But here's the thing about oldies change with every generation. Like the thing is that Nirvana song is technically an oldie because it's over 25 years. I think it's like 31 years old.
Yeah, 31 years old.
And I'll say this, my boss's cutoff for the music is right around 1996, 97. So anything that's over 20, 25, and every now and then something a little bit newer will sneak in for my show. But something that fits into that category is up until about 96, 97. So, and that Nirvana song was 91. Now, here's the thing that I think is interesting about that Whitney song. And I think it's also true of like Kool and the Gang.
Michael Jackson, like all these
Celebration. All the songs. Yeah. Those were such well-crafted songs that they were produced to be really popular at the time, but they ended up being emblematic of the time. They evoke a certain kind of emotion because of how well crafted and produced it is. Like Whitney Houston had the voice of an angel, but here's the thing that makes her really special. She had producers and a label head in Clive Davis, who envisioned what he wanted her to, like how he envisioned her sound to be. Like Whitney's voice will be forever. Like I just wonder what would have happened had she not died in that hotel room in February of whatever year it was, 2006, whatever it was.
No, it wasn't, because I was hanging out with you that night that it happened. We were going to own an engine to go have dinner, and we both got alerts on our phones right before.
And we were like,
so we're going to have a fun conversation and a fun evening, and then it turned into a Debbie Downer. They started playing Whitney, throughout the speakers.
Look,
we were done.
We had fun. We drank. The burgers were fire, and it ended up being a different kind of celebration.
It ended up turning out to be a different celebration, but like I was there with you, that moment, yeah.
But think about this. Think about artists like Whitney, who will always be played because it was a particular moment in time and a particular way they were produced. And that's the reason why you can play them at weddings, because everybody from somebody's grandmama to the baby is going to get up because it has that thing that tickles that inside of your ear that makes you go, ooh, I want to dance with somebody. Ooh, like everybody, and all the words, it makes you feel good. Celebration, even though Kool and the Gang didn't have very many crossover hits, that song, even though people make fun of it, they will still get up and dance to it.
I mean, I used to DJ weddings. I did that right out of college for a couple of summers. And I think I got to appreciate all genres of music because of that. You didn't just have to play the songs that you knew or the songs that you liked, but people liked, songs from the 50s. They liked country music. They loved popular music, and you had to make everybody happy. And you saw the songs bring joy to people. And I think that's why too, like, no matter, even if I hear Love Shack, it's one of those songs that like, I like it. It's catchy.
Everybody's like,
but it makes me think of like how much happiness people are having, during their celebrations. And I remember hearing that song as a kid, and like, it just invokes that feeling of like good times.
And here's the thing, there's certain artists that their music will always be like that. Elton John, Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, Prince, trying to think who else.
The Beatles.
The Beatles for sure. But you know what? The Beatles are interesting because they are a particular generation's music. The Beatles belong to the boomers, even though if you are a music fan, you will love their music and appreciate it and all those things. There is something about the Beatles, the Doors, Jimi Hendrix that belongs to a particular generation and a particular moment in time. And so even though they are classics, they are also oldies because they are emblematic of that era.
Because I, obviously as a kid have a different definition of an oldie back then than I do now. If Dick Biondi was the one introducing the song, it's an oldie. That was my definition.
If Dick Biondi or Herb Kent talked about it, it's an oldie.
It's an oldie.
The thing is, though, is that we as Americans, like as a cultural thing, we have challenges with aging, right? And so we think of our parents' music as oldies. And then when we hear somebody younger than us talk about our favorite hits as oldies, then we get all in our feelings about it. But the reality is that time goes on, music moves forward. And yes, like, I'm just happy I was working in the heyday of 90s R&B. Like, legit, you can't tell me that there was a better time to be in radio. Like, literally, I mean, Jodeci and Boys to Men and New Edition, BBD, all of there was not a better era for me. Why? Because I was out in the clubs kicking it to this music. Like, it's bringing up good memories of good things with my friends. You
were just at the New Edition Jodeci concert here that was at the United Center here in Chicagoland. What was that feeling like for you? And when you looked out in the audience, did you see multi-generational families out there celebrating the music?
I did. It was mostly my age. It was mostly like, I would say anywhere from late 30s. So like, as one of my friends calls it, geriatric millennials to Gen X. It was a solid Gen X show. There was a lot of grays in the house because we don't care anymore. But it was funny because there were people in the audience who clearly were fans of the music because I think their parents were fans, that they were younger. And I remember there was a moment, and I was lucky enough to be close up, but I had a little space because we were right by an aisle. I had come back from the bathroom, and they had just started, and they were doing some song, and I was doing all the New Edition moves, and I did the whole thing. And this girl was like, "Oh, you really know what you're doing?" I was like, "I was at the first concert tour."
And if they're doing it again, I'm going to be right there as well too.
Exactly. And she was like, "Go ahead on, you got the moves." And I was like, "If you call me ma'am, I'm done."